We might start again. Here in North Sydney, I'll just fill in our wider audience with something of the sound in the background here. We're filming in a school, and we've got lots of kids running around, or we have had in the last little while. So if that's a sound you can hear, it's because we're in a school. I wonder what the sounds are at your place, but here it's been school sounds with kids. We're going to start again now with looking at Possum's story, and then we're going to hear from Bishop Columba. And then we're going to have a bit of conversational time where perhaps some of our people here in North Sydney might ask Bishop or Richard or Michelle perhaps to respond if they'd like to. And you out there might simply have had a bit more of a break or have had a chance to already have some questions and have had that conversation. But whether you've done it sort of first or last, it doesn't matter. Just that's the way we're doing it here in North Sydney. So without any further ado, we'll have a look at Possum's story.
My dad gave me the nickname Possum when I was 3 months old, and it has stuck. Here I am all these years later. My proper name's Cheryl Dawn, actually, Dawn after Dawn Fraser. I've had a few different occupations. The one I'm doing at the moment I really love because I like helping people. So I'm working for, we're auspiced by Marima Health, and the service is called Marabina, which is Wiradjuri language for hand outstretched. We support Aboriginal people with one of the 6 chronic diseases to attend any sort of medical appointments and to get specialist services. We grew up in an era where everybody was along the same level and you know, not everybody had a lot. So there were only a few families that were pretty well off. We went to the Catholic school, which was only a couple of blocks from home, and it was lovely because back then we had nuns there, you know, that wore the habit and everything, and it was lovely. And it was just, and it was a really nice school. It was always, and that's why I chose to send my boys there as well. And then they went on to Catholic at high school, but it was just a lovely little school, and it's just because it wasn't too many people there either. And it was special. Unless you have that belief, people don't understand it. I've lost a lot of family members, younger, and you know, most people say there isn't a God, but I don't believe that, and I think my faith has gotten me through because I believe we go somewhere special, so that makes it more accepting, and I think we're all on earth for this purpose, for a purpose. We don't know what until the end of our day, I guess, but I always think no, and yeah, so I do have a strong faith. I don't go around and preach it to people. And I think, and I'm not one to go to Mass every week. I enjoy, but when I go to Mass, I feel really good, I enjoy it. But I believe I do more as a Christian person in my day-to-day life. Like I treat people with respect. And even if people are rude to me, I just think, you know, everybody's different. They're having a bad day or doing whatever. I like people and I like to do little things in the community. Whether it be, like it's funny, I will pick up papers on the street and little things like that because I think, you know, it's part of that, being a community person, doing a good deed or whatever, you know, or if I'm driving past, I hate to drive past somebody that I know and not offer them a lift unless there's extreme circumstances that I can't, whether it be, you know, it doesn't matter who it is, because I believe we're all equal to a degree, and unless you do something wrong by me, I will treat you with respect, and I love people. To be a good Christian is not to be at Mass every week, it's to be a good person and to help your neighbour. And I know too, some of them, people think they don't deserve help. You don't know their circumstances. Don't be so quick to judge. Understand where these people have come from. And we're lucky that as such a diverse community that people do come together. Unfortunately, that's not always the case too, which is, it's part of life. But I think We need to come together more and support one another. Some people have got a nice car, a nice home, other people don't. And not everybody's taught how to look after a home either, and to tend, whether it be just to keep your lawn green, you know, all those things. And I just think, well, we need to be more as a community to look after, as I said, charity begins at home. Look after those here, not necessarily away. So I think it's nicer if we can come together like that. And as I said, to be a good Christian, do something good for the people, not just think, oh, well, you know what, I've gone to church this week, that makes me a good person. Not necessarily always the way. It's a part of you being kind to others. And you know what, we don't have to like who we're helping, but I just think we'll reap our rewards in the end. May last year, my son had an accident, my oldest son, and he had a severe brain injury, and it was really touch and go. When it first happened, he hadn't regained consciousness. Anyway, it was the scariest thing of my life. I think I'm a strong person, I can deal with anything, but that really, really blew me. Anyway, he was in Canberra Hospital, and when I went down, I'd been down there a few days, and I didn't sort of tell anybody much other than my family and whatever, because it was important that I just needed to be there and be there for him. But I did. His father died 10 years ago, and I'd said to him, you know, I don't care what you do, you're not taking him from me, you're not to do that. And I believe the only thing that got him through were prayers. I had a message from Mary Ann Gordon to say, you know, she'd just heard what had happened, and it was the nicest message I think I got, because she said they were having Mass that night, and Father Magnus was dedicating Mass to Damien's, to his survival and he's getting better. And I thought, oh my God, that was the nicest thing. So when I'd spoken to this person, I rang them back about raising money, and I said, look, if you would really like to do something for me, if anybody in the community wants to do anything for me, go to Mass. I've actually found, and even though my work, we don't do case coordination, but if I see a person in need, I'm more inclined to help them out, and I'm happy to do that, and just to work with people and to make sure that they're safe and okay, because now having a better understanding of health needs and people, I'm probably more empathetic in that way, and to see somebody in need, and maybe too, because my mother's older, you see somebody who's a little bit not well or not functioning properly, to give them that little bit of assistance, which is good, and you feel better for it. And it's nice, like whether it be helping somebody into a car, giving an older person a lift, or taking something, carrying something to the car for them, doing whatever you can to help them out. It's good, and like I said, it's part of the community. I needed a change, so I went and did the Links to Learning with Centrecare, and I'd work in the high school 2 days a week. One day was with several different classes, but then I had another day where I worked with some boys that their attendance rates were really low at school and whatever, and wanted to get them up and to give them and to work with them. And they were mainly probably 14, 15, 16 even. Anyway, when I first started, luckily I knew one or two of them, but my kids had been left school so long I wasn't sure of who was who. I approached the bakery, the butchers, Essential Energy, the Shire, like the waterworks, Cobo, everywhere. And these boys, I would end up every Wednesday when I'd arrive at school at 9 o'clock, they'd be sitting out the front waiting for me. What are we going to do today, Possum? The guys at the butcher shop were amazing. We went out the back, they showed us from start to finish what to do, and you know, they had let them have a go at making sausages, and then they had a go at the mock chicken legs, and then they gave them all a knife each, and I thought, oh, where's this going to go? But you know, showed they could cut little bits and do whatever, and I thought it was so nice. So when it all finished, I said, look, can I get a photo of you with the boys? So we did a group, and then they said, no, Possum, you've got to be in it. So we took a group photo, and then I just printed it out A4 size and said, you know, big thank you from the boys and Possum at Centrecare. I went into the butcher shop a few days later, and they had it stuck up on their wall. I truly believe there is a God and that we do go somewhere better. And you know, things happen to us in life for a reason, and sometimes it's to test your faith, but it's hard, I think, because I've always went to the Catholic school, used to go to Mass regularly and things like that. So I've always believed in God and always had that faith, and not like I've never read the Bible fully or anything like that, but it's one of those things, it's just something that you believe in. It's one of those things, it's really hard to describe, but I've always had it. I've never once walked away from it, and I guess because it's probably been a big part of my life, but not in your face as such, and I'm one of those, I don't speak out strongly about it, but I do believe. And yeah, I've sinned along the way too, but you know, like I said, we're only human.
Another wonderful story, Possum's story. Having a bit of a giggle, Mary Ann Gordon's here with us today in North Sydney. Mary Ann's having a bit of a giggle at a couple of those moments where her own brother is the invalid that Possum is helping into the car. And obviously she doesn't think he needs so much help. But I'm sure the point was that she could help people who needed help. We'll take a few minutes here in North Sydney, and you take as long as you like, and when you come back, engage with Bishop Columba Macbeth Green. I'll ask now Bishop Columba to come and talk with us a little bit about his sense of the people out in his diocese of Wilcannia Forbes and what gift they are for the rest of us.
Thank you very much. I'd like to start with an apology. Not an apology that I'm born and bred in the Diocese of Wilcannia Forbes, but when I was born and when I was growing up out on the station, my dad always told me, if you're going into town, you're going to church, you're going to something important, you make sure you dress well. No matter how poor we might be, we don't have to let everyone know it. So, of course, I knew I was coming down to North Sydney, going to the Big Smoke, so I made sure I got my nice shirt out and I had it nice ironed and my jacket and my suit, and I'm coming down. And I got to the airport at Parkes yesterday to catch the flight, and I realised I forgot my suitcase. So all I had was the clothes I was wearing all yesterday, which is what you're getting today. So I'm sorry, I mean no disrespect by being dressed like this, so at least you know the background to it, because the way I was brought up, that was how you showed respect. It's one way of showing respect to others that you're coming to, is how you present yourself. Right, I'm from the diocese. We're a bit traditional out there in many ways, in some ways we're not. It's a venerable tradition that you always have your best speaker last at something like this. This is where we're not traditional, okay? Definitely not traditional. When I was made a bishop of Wilcannia Forbes 4 years ago, I didn't know what to expect. I was born and bred there. I left the diocese when I was 19, and I've been everywhere else since then. Then I came back, and then I started to realise what bishop had to do. The paperwork, nearly 6 years without a bishop, the problems. You had to have the answer to everything. So I was in there trying to get my head around this diocese. 52% of New South Wales, we're bigger than France. I remember to this day a turning point. I went to local Catholic high school in Forbes, and I was in talking, I think it was year 9 students, and they're asking me all these questions. And I was answering the questions, having good talk back and forth with the kids. One question I was asked, and I could not answer the question. And that rocked me. When this girl asked me, "Bishop, what's the best thing you like about being a bishop?" And I went, I couldn't answer the question. I ended up, after a little pause, coming out with something, I'm doing God's will. It's the best I could come up with, and which is true. But I came home and I reflected on that. That was something I said, well, what is it to be a bishop in Wilcannia Forbes? And something that I was taught at the seminary came into my head. It's one of the very few things that I was ever taught at the seminary that's ever come back into my head since I've left. And I'm not even sure where it came from. I think it was Pope St. John Paul II. But it was something that struck me then, and it came back, and it's still in my head. And it's simply this, that the role of a priest is to make Christ present to his people. And that kept coming back in my mind. And that's been a mantra since I've been in Wilcannia Forbes, making Christ present to his people. And I take that very, very seriously as a bishop. How do you make Christ present to your people? You can do it through the sacraments. You can do it through all the normal ways of Catholic life, liturgical life, ministry, etc. But then I found out in my diocese there's another totally different aspect of making Christ present to his people. You actually got to go there and be physically present to your people. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. As I travelled around the diocese, I realised that just the bishop turning up could change people's lives. I thought, how good's this? People that are out in the middle of drought, really struggling, you drive up their driveway and the bishop's coming, you have a cup of tea with them and you say, oh, Bishop, goodness, you came all this way out to visit us. Oh, yeah. You sit down and you have a cup of tea. That gets around to other farmers, other people, that you actually were there. And that can profoundly change someone's life. That's, to me, another aspect of making Christ present to his people. Go and walk with your people. And I think our Holy Father, the Pope, uses the word accompaniment, doesn't he? You accompany those that are marginalised, that need help, you walk with them. Well, in my diocese, to walk with them, you've got to get to them for a start because it's so big. So you have to put a bit of effort into actually going out and visit places. It's the 9.5-hour drive to my cathedral from my house. I mean, you have to do that and you have to stop in, and that's a really difficult part of my role as a bishop, is the driving, but I love it in a way because there's no mobile phone reception. People can't get you, and you saw the roads. They're just flat and beautiful, and I stop. I have a caravan that I pull, off-road caravan. I can go off-road, and I can stay at stations, stay at little communities for a couple of nights and be present. And you pull off the road, it might be off a dirt road somewhere, and you're going to have a cuppa, and you pull off and you stop and there's silence. Absolute silence. You might hear a couple of birds in the middle of summer and the drought, the little birds are dead, you're not going to hear them, but you might hear some birds, but apart from that, or the wind. If you're happy enough to sort of pull over where there's a tree somewhere, you might hear the wind blowing through the tree, otherwise it's silent. And you get time to actually go, wow. I mean, this is just, the true sense of the word's awesome. So this is where I am, and it humbles you and puts things into perspective. So I suppose making Christ present to his people for me is so important. I then put that, well, that's as a bishop, it's important to be present, to be able to talk to people and walk with them. But then it's important for my clergy to do the same. Then we saw in our videos, this is what the religious have done. They made Christ present to his people out there. They went there. They were in those little communities, in convents, in schools. Missionaries of Charity were at Bourke. They went there. Then the next extension of that is the baptised, all of us. This is not just the bishop's role, the priest's role, the religious role to make Christ present to his people, but it's the role of all the baptised, all those members of the church, to make Christ present to his people. And you can see that in those videos. That's a theme that strikes me and it warms my heart, because it can be a very lonely life out in my diocese, even for a bishop. Very lonely life. You got all these problems, but you know what we do have is this strong sense of community, and this is so important. Now, when that whole community is under pressure with drought and so forth, what the community needs is hope, and the hope comes through Christ being there. And that's why going out from the church, be it the bishop, priest, sister, pastoral worker, and sitting down and making the effort and having a cup of tea is so important. It's making Christ present to his people, and that gives people hope that they're not forgotten. And I think that that's just an amazing thing that we have, the simplicity of life, but that communal aspect that I just love it, you know, to go into, stop at a little pub going, and then you go in and, good day, and you introduce yourself, I'm the bishop. And mostly you get, and what are you drinking? Well, you have a beer, and but sit down, and you just talk to you. What are you doing out here, and so forth and so forth. You're just accepted, and it's sort of so beautiful. It's a really beautiful part of my diocese. So I think it's important, and it's important, I think, to realise that that's what the people. This is something I wanted to share with the wider church. Because when I was made bishop, one of the things, even some of my brother bishops came and said to me, as a new bishop, they said, "Oh, you poor fella, fancy them doing that to you, sticking you out there in the middle of nowhere. Oh, the church is dead in the diocese, in the country diocese." I hear that a lot. There's no faith anymore out there. There's no people. There's nothing out there. That's one I get quite often. There's nothing out there. Why waste your time and effort? Why put a young bishop out in a diocese like that where there's no people and there's no faith? What are you doing? What's there to do? So I have to go through this quite a lot. And I thought, well, hang on, I want to share, well, what is out here? And there is great faith, and there's great hope, there's endurance. We've heard about that today. And I think that's important for the wider church, wherever you are, to realise that, hang on, yeah, what did Wally say? You got to expect a flogging if you're living out here. Life is not always a box of chocolates. You know, I think in scripturally it's referred to, well, Jesus as the cross. You're going to have difficult times. But Wally, he said, it's how you wear the flogging, how you get through it, your endurance and your faith. And I just find that so empowering for myself, and to be present. So I think that's really important, because I think sometimes the church can get into a corporate model of church where it's a business and you're an administrator and you lose touch with the real people. Most of those people, except Possum, I know quite well. Been to their houses. Our Aboriginal people up there, I've done a healing day with them very recently. Great, a red dust healing day. And it's a whole thing from the diocese, from Aboriginal people, of how to heal, emotional healing. And I went up there and I said, look, I'd like to join in with you to do this day of reflection. Yeah, there's no problems. And you got to do it. you sat there and they were your community. And there's this stereotypes, I suppose, that they wouldn't accept you, or it's just not true. The people there, their hearts are so great. It's just beautiful. And that Aboriginal community then at Bourke, we've just opened that men's centre that was talked about there to carry on the sisters' legacy, Missionaries of Charity. At the Welcome to Country ceremony by the Aboriginal elder there, got us up, and the Minister for Health and myself either side of him, and he said, first of all, on behalf of the Aboriginal people, would like to say sorry to you. Sorry to you for all the things we may have done, the things we may have thought, the bitterness we may have had towards you in the past. And I was just there, wow, this is where Christ is present with his people, when you can have that at a ceremony. And I just go and tell them, I said, look, you're building on a foundation of the faith that went before. We mightn't have the sisters, you mightn't have priests, it'll have to be you. You've got you've got the torch. You've got to run with it. You've got the light. You build on the foundation. You don't have to start again. You're not left in the middle of nowhere. This is what hope's all about. Make Christ present to his people. And each and every Christian, I think, that is a vocation for us all. And I can see it lived in the lives of the people on our videos, and that's what I think that I would like to share with the rest of the country and the world, that hope is so powerful, and just because you might be marginalised, you might be living in the middle of nowhere, you are important, you have a spirituality, and you have a lot of good news to share. Thank you.
Well, again, I'm feeling a bit sort of wiped out and exhausted because it's just so much to take in, and it's so profound, I think, Well, I get quite emotional when I hear our bishop speak, because we don't have many bishops who speak like that, and I think that is really, really awesome. So thank you, Bishop, again. I mean, he always starts by saying, I've got nothing to say, I don't know, no idea what I'm doing here. But I haven't been around him once, I haven't been in his company once when he hasn't come through with something which reveals the heart of, I think, what is happening in the Diocese of Wilcannia Forbes, and the heart of what's happening in our church more widely than that. There are still some seriously good people working very hard in the church to hold that torch and hand it on, and to have a bishop who wants lay people to know that, and who supports lay people to be lay workers, not in a new way so much as in a refreshed way, is inspirational. And I hope that alone starts conversations all around the country around how we as lay people can build on this extraordinary gift and legacy which has been given us by the sisters and the priests and the brothers and all those who have gone before. In North Sydney, we'll pause for a moment and set up for a bit of a conversation that hopefully some of our speakers might respond to some questions. And out there, you might do it differently again, doesn't matter. You can do it any way you like, but have a conversation now or later or in between or tomorrow or next month if you like. But in a moment, we'll have a little bit more to share. Welcome back, and to the part of the conversation that really is the conversation. And whilst we're modelling it here in North Sydney, the way you do your conversation might be very different. It's just one way to do it. What we're going to do within the context of North Sydney is ask anyone who would like to make a comment or ask a question or whatever to just come to our microphone, because without them standing there, we don't have any decent sound to gather that comment. And then our speakers, whichever one or others, it might be all of them at the same time, standing there like some sort of Peter, Paul and Mary, I don't know, might respond together. We'll just sort of wing it and see how that goes a little bit. So has anybody got a question or an observation that from here in North Sydney that they might like? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the presentations. They've been just fantastic, really spectacular. It's been something I've been thinking about recently, and I was talking with some people yesterday around the whole impact of connection, and connection is fundamental to everything you've been speaking about this morning, and so witnessed through the different presentations that we've seen on the video, and also so important where people feel really connected, whether it's been with the clerical or with the religious or with clergy over time, and as that's disappeared, how lay people themselves have to rise up to make those connections very real between themselves and for each other. So in an age where we know technology is incredibly impacting, and whilst I'm not a fan of technology replacing people, because I believe in presence, being present, and I think that's quite fundamental in the Christian message. I just wondered your thoughts, and it's to the three of you, whichever would like to respond, in terms of how you see, or the capacity perhaps for technology to perhaps help connect people, how you would see that working, especially given there are difficulties out west with being able to access, and is there any sort of way forward with that, or is it really just going to be left in the reality of person-to-person contact? So I just open it up as a thought. Thanks.
I might ask Bishop first, and then Richard, and Michelle. Where we are, the internet's a bit of a dirty word, really. It's a bit hard to rely on it. Bishop, have you got any sense of what you might? That one, I think.
I've got to get this right, see. I've got to do what I'm told. It's very important. For us, we do a fair bit on Facebook. We try and have some connection with Facebook, but like I said, it's really difficult because the technology, NBN, well, it's not rolled out there yet. It's very difficult. I would be more encouraging people. See, the connections are there in the bush. Like if I go and visit someone in Burke, or go out to a station in Burke, go out to Wally and Marg at the Mitchell's place, the Elliots down in Wilkenya know I went and visited Wally and Marg Mitchell there, because they all know each other, and they're pretty. The Bush Telegraph is up and going. They sit down and have a yarn. Most, if you ring at night, you're going to have to wait because most people there are engaged because they're on the phone, and they do a lot of that. So that sort of works there. In the communities, there's that natural community too, which we've still got. Some places it's starting to break down because there's less and less families. A lot of the big corporations are buying the properties and so forth, so there's less family farms, so there's less people to actually form a community in these little places. That's a challenge for us. But you still got, if they, you're going to church, they still all talk to each other after church and have a yarn. The farmers get up and the kids play over there. The stuff that used to happen, I think, everywhere. So I think the challenge is to create that sense in the city, really. For me, I look at a lot of parishes, try to create that sense of community in city parishes or larger parishes where they put on a cup of tea after Mass, encourage people to stay and have some fellowship, whereas most of the country places it just happens. You don't have to, it might be the other way, Father, now get out, I've got to switch the lights off, I've got to, shut the door, just go home, just get off the property, please. So I think there's a difference there. So I don't know. I think something should be said, you know, if you're my other illustrious speakers, about media and connection with the city context.
I was recently working in the Toowoomba diocese, which, like the Wilcannia Forbes diocese, is a vast diocese, and I was still shocked with the NBN rollout at how many black spots there were. Coming in from Quilpie to Toowoomba, there were hundreds and hundreds of kilometres where there was no access to internet or to phones. I think that's a disgrace. And I think that if we're going to have the rhetoric of caring for the bush and looking after primary producers and making rural communities less isolated, then just because they've got small electoral numbers doesn't mean that they should not be catered for. And therefore, I think that's the first point I would like to make, is that our brothers and sisters in the Catholic community in the cities need to be very articulate in defence of our brothers and sisters in the bush, because they don't necessarily claim they only have one seat covering a vast area, versus we who should be saying to our senators, particularly our senators who are meant to represent the state of Queensland or New South Wales or Victoria, that it is your job to see that people have equal access to what is now a fundamental communications right. And I think it should be couched in those terms. Second thing I do want to say is, when we do have good access, or when we have any access, I certainly think that some communities now that have to have the liturgy of the word and communion without the presence of a priest, sometimes the anxiety there for a lot of those communities is, well, who's going to preach and what do they say? And there are lots of resources out there, but increasingly I think we need to have good online resources too, where weekly reflections on the scriptures, good, short, good ones are presented and given, because I think the people in the bush deserve to have the very best scriptural and theological reflections. My experience of even turning up to these places is that there's great need and a great hunger, and I think technology and communications allows us now to be much more accessible. And then finally, I think something like this very process, this very package when it's finished, is something which is a very good model for other places, where you don't have to travel somewhere to, it comes to you when you can see it, as you can see it, and to unpack that. We're not the only country in the world that has vast distances in a big country. I think of the Catholic Church in Canada. It equally has absolutely vast country dioceses. And so I think we should all start to work together. There's got to be an international conversation among rural people in the Catholic Church right around the world, and trying to sustain and encourage that, I think, would be very helpful. I work in media, so I'm all for it. I think it's a good thing. It can be abused and has been abused, but I think we've got to just try and utilise these, because these are new tools for evangelisation, and they're given to us for a very important reason, and I want to redouble our efforts. But I think there's got to be a much greater relationship between city Catholics and country Catholics about how we can all leverage every single thing we can to make it work for all of us.
Well, I would just move on a little bit further, from what Richard has said. I work in formal theological education for people doing degrees in theology. So this is an area that the Church has been trying to work in for some time. And I would say we haven't got the model fully worked out yet. The media can be great for getting information across, and there are all kinds of different programs and electronic learning management platforms being devised. I'm inclined to think that we find that you can get a certain amount of information across. It depends, of course, how good your media is, whether you can really have interactions. I'm inclined to think that there's a point at which faith is caught, not taught, as they say. And so I think there needs to be a strong sense of personal connection. So I think there needs to be a mix of what's available, electronically, and then just personal connection where you can see the whites of the eyes. So I think there needs to be a combination of that. But we are very aware where I am in, the Catholic Institute of Sydney, which is in Strathfield, where we do all of our teaching face-to-face, but we are very aware of the vast number of people who simply cannot travel there for the kind of way we teach, who want to learn and really need to know, so that they are in a position to live their faith in today's world, responding to the conditions of life today with the same kind of level of understanding and sophistication with which they go about other parts of their lives in which they are properly formed. So, I'd say this is, a project that is underway, but lots and lots of work to be done.
Well, thank you for the question initially. What strikes me in that is your comment, Michelle, and it's come through with Richard and Bishop too. It's the people, in a sense, and the face-to-face sort of engagement with real people and real stories that I think is part of the gift of Lessons from the Long Paddock, in that there is, in a sense, back to you again, back to your experience again, and then the theoretical, and then the academic, and whatever else we can offer. But as models go, I think Lessons from the Long Paddock, and thank you, Richard, for commenting on it, because I think that's part of what we were hoping, that it would be about not missing out on that human component, the people component, that actual personal engagement with somebody in particular, that makes it a transforming experience, and hopefully others will do the same.
I wonder whether it might help us, not just with Wilcannia Forbes, but for rural parishes to increasingly be twinned to city parishes. This parish of North Sydney, this Jesuit parish, we have a parish at Emerton, Mount Druitt, in the Parramatta diocese, and we're twinned. So that's been wonderful for this very blessed community, financially blessed community, to be connected with brothers and sisters who are rich in lots of other ways, but often not financially. But also, apart from their financial need, there's not anything that we put on here that we don't share with them, that we don't encourage them to be part of, and vice versa. There's lots of things that happen out there that our people are invited to, and the building up of those relationships builds up consciousness, and then I think that's the beginning of conversion. So I wonder whether that could possibly happen, that formal or like lots of parishes are twinned with East Timor or twinned with Cambodia, or an orphanage in Vietnam, which are fantastic. But I'd like us maybe to, particularly with this big drought, we're going to pray about our brothers and sisters in the bush a hell of a lot, and so we should. How about adopting a parish? And that would go across diocesan boundaries, and much more would build up personal relationships. I thought what you just said, Sister Colleen, was fantastic.
I'm just going to actually flick to Paul Napier, who's a classic actually example of what you're just suggesting, Richard. Paul Napier's from Peakhurst Parish here in Sydney, and he rang the Chancery office in Wilcannia Forbes some weeks ago and said, how can we help you guys? And so a relationship has begun. So have you got a question or comment, perhaps, Paul, you want to respond? Doesn't matter. Make it whatever you like.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be here this morning. So inspirational when you hear the stories of the resilience and faith of our country people in these harshest conditions. It's just so inspiring. And I'm on a committee, and we are fortunate enough to be allocate money to different charities, and the situation that you guys are facing out in Wilcannia Forbes is certainly one that we were very interested in. And
fantastic.
But just on another note, I was probably just going to comment about that Jonathan story, and I'm just so inspired by, the quality of that man and his story, and how I see people like him. How can we get those guys into all those different communities, and they realise the white guys would go out and we'd be saying to them try and get him into a classroom situation, but he goes down the riverbank and he's fishing, and he gets his guitar out, and I mean that's. His ministry is just magnificent. How do we get one of those guys in every town? I don't know. Are they out there of that quality?
They're out there.
Wow.
They're there.
Yeah, bring them forward. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. I'm very conscious of time, and here in North Sydney we're going to have to wind it up, but doesn't mean the conversation has to end. In fact, hopefully this is just a catalyst for more conversation, which would be wonderful. I want to very much thank our speakers, Sister Michelle and Father Richard and Bishop Columba, and also all people here and all of those out there, wherever you might be. Special thanks this morning to Rocket Productions, because as Michelle indicated, it was a pretty special experience working with them, and we had a few really good laughs too. I have to just share one of them. The Rocket guys were from the city and they're a bit nervous about snakes, and I did my level best to provide a snake or two, but no snake. In the 5 days that we were out there filming, not one snake, and it was a big disappointment, I have to say. I didn't want any sort of deadly bites, because we were a long way from anywhere. We did lose a drone up in Wally's tree. Wally did suggest that he could shoot it down for us, but we suggested that that wouldn't be good for the cameraman. He looked nervous about that. We'd leave the drone in the tree, but we got it down with a stick anyway. It was wonderful working with Rocket Productions, so thank you so much. Wally and Margie and Jonathan and Possum and Jason couldn't be here. We don't have the funds to bring them down. So next year, 2019, wouldn't it be great if we had enough money in the account to bring the stories and the people with the stories to talk about what their experiences were, and bring them down to the city, or perhaps film out west. And some of you by then caught the bug, and 3 years down might want to come out to Wilcannia. It's a bloody long way, but it would be great. Who knows? To sponsors this year, we can't do this. We can't do Lessons from the Long Paddock without sponsorship. This year, the Sisters of St Joseph, the Sisters of Mercy, the Catholic Care Office in Wilcannia Forbes, Catholic Education Canberra Goulburn, and Catholic Healthcare Limited were very generous and helped us provide the funds to have Rocket Productions come and film for us and do a morning like this. So thanks to them, and please, if you know anybody you think might be interested in being a sponsor, next year we're going to need sponsors again, so please sponsor us. And as to the new model for lay workers, I'm being careful now not to say ministers, because it opens up a whole other conversation and it's a bit distracting. Workers, we've got lay workers here in Wilcannia Forbes, and here in Sydney and everywhere else there are lay workers. Wouldn't it be great if we had money enough to resource those people to work full-time where possible? So please go to our website, have a look at what we've got to offer in terms of catalyst for conversation around lay workers and how to support them. And my name, Kate Engelbrecht. My number's on the Wilcannia Forbes diocesan homepage. Call me if you want to chat about any way that you might be able to help. When you go to that website, everybody out there, please have a look at how to donate. We've set it up. It took ages. But we got it. We've got a button that helps you donate. Lessons from the Long Paddock in terms of promotions will happen in the next few months. We'll let you know how to find a way to access it, and hopefully we'll also develop a DVD and you can maybe sell that. Would be great out there. Would be terrific. But look, thank you so much, people here in North Sydney and speakers in particular, and thank you out there in wherever you are.